hours driving on the highway. Far away, far away, far away. Every moment I was spending on regrets was such a waste, such a waste, such a waste. Looking on the city lights.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danille, here without Ken. So we think Ken is running a bit late. So I think I'm going to just start, and he's going to join us here in the next probably 5 minutes. Don't know if he got held up in traffic or what his deal is. So, in fact, let me just text him now and let him know that we're starting. All right. So anyways, we had a fun weekend this weekend. We were in Vegas. We actually weren't supposed to be here today. We came back early because we just could not do another night in Vegas. So we had to text Jerry, our camera guy, this morning and say, listen, we're going to come in. We're going to do the live and keep it at that. So let's start with the Twitter questions of the week. And Ken had asked, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to invest their money but's too nervous to start? So Dre said start with something simple, a Roth IRA type of thing. Do that by dollar cost averaging and not touching it. So a 401k or a IRA is a good place to start, especially if it's employer run. You know, I know Ken and I don't do much with the IRAs, but if you just have a little bit of money, it's not a bad place to put it. It gets you in that habit of saving, which is important. Another thing that you could do is just slowly save your money for, your first rental property. I mean, that's what I did. I just slowly stocked away my money for my first rental. But no matter where you put it, putting it somewhere is good. Oh, look who joined us.
Hey,
Ken
sorry.
is in the house.
I apologize.
Running late.
I was.
So we're doing the Twitter questions right now.
Cool.
So, Jerry, if you want to pop up that second Twitter question. Dylan is saying to start small. Allocating hard-earned money to an asset will hopefully encourage you to learn more about it. So
Right.
Get a small amount of skin in the game. And that's kind of basically what I was just saying. You just need to be saving for something.
But also small mistakes.
Right.
Small money, small mistakes. That's the whole point, right?
Well, right. We have one of our followers from our inner circle that has a question for later in the show about I'm a newbie. How do I start investing in apartment buildings? It's like, whoa. Like, why don't we start small?
That's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
I think I get it. Like, you should always want to swing for the fences, but I think you gotta make small mistakes first, because there's a lot, and it's not just reading books and listening to tapes or people like us.
Exactly.
Yeah, use your own money, or if you're using somebody else's, make very, very, very small mistakes.
Yes. All right, Jerry, pop up that third comment. Luna says, if investing in real estate, join investment groups, research rents and sales. See what's active, pending, sold in the past 6 months, and turn around and check them out. Talk to random people, figure out what you bring to the table, and find like-minded people. And this is kind of what we talked about, last week when it came to, or in our newsletter, about the power of networking, right? Like people are always asking us, like, how do I find a mentor? Well, you don't just you don't just message somebody you've never met before, like, hey, can you be my mentor? It's probably not going to work out for you. What you do is you network. And when you network, you meet people that know more than you do. You build relationships, and that's how you find a mentor.
Yeah, I'll give you multiple examples. Obviously, you guys know I've done a lot with Rich Dad and Kiyosaki, and so part of that is going to events to meet with like-minded people. A lot of the people that go to those events are like-minded. I do a lot of industry events. So National Apartment Association, I was in the National Multi-Housing Council 2 weeks ago in Vegas. 12,000 people that were in the multifamily space were there. Brokers, owners, lenders, equity, investors. And then, of course, you have your normal conferences. There's all kinds of real estate conferences. Limitless is coming up in June. We had 1,500 people sold out, about a month before. And I would say half of those people were in real estate. And they were raising money, they were buying stuff, they had all kinds of cool ideas. So that's the point. Find your tribe. It's no different than if you follow a football team. Like I know you're a huge Steelers fan. Well, there's a Steeler bar in the Phoenix area, and all the Steelers go there. That's your tribe. So find your tribe. It's not that hard. And and then all of a sudden, there's going to be people there that will help you a lot. You'll find mentors there too.
Well, just to touch on the Steeler bar, like when I moved here, I didn't know who to watch games with because back where I'm from, like there's tons of Steelers fans, so it's easy to figure out who to watch games with. So I went over to Harold's, the Steelers bar, and I basically just met people there to watch games with, like, so if you go to somewhere where everyone's doing what you want to do, you're going to build relationships and find people to do it with.
That's the point. Like, that's what Limitless is. That's what some of these conferences are people that have that same kind of mindset. And they're also, if, there's going to be a lot of beginners there too, but there's going to be a lot of people there that say, I know where you've been. I know where you want to go. And I can relate. And that, there's, all you got to do is ask.
Absolutely. So let's touch on Limitless. So Limitless tickets, they're going up here soon.
They are.
So if you want to go to Limitless, now's the time to go up. Prices are going up in about 5 days. I believe that's on Friday.
Yeah, I think we're sending an email out, and this is it, guys. Like they're going to be close to 1,600 here before you know it. It's interesting to me because, last year was our first year. We sold out in May, I think a month before. I couldn't believe how many ticket sales we had and like that, at full price.
Yeah.
It was surprising to me. A lot of people wait till last minute. They're fine with that.
I think they wait because they want to, they want to know, what to expect, or maybe they're saving for it. But if you get in early, you do get a discount. It's going to be an awesome event. Skylar said that they're raising money to get VIP, and Brandon said he just booked his hotel rooms over the weekend. So
yeah, that's the other thing. I know last year people ran out of hotel rooms. The hotel, we had a huge hotel, by the way. We had the Westin, and it sold out, and the people were in satellite hotels. So at the very least, book your hotel room refundable, at least, because you're going to want to be at that hotel. We're at the Marriott Desert Ridge, which is the biggest hotel in Arizona. It's the largest one we could get. And we have the whole place.
Awesome. Yeah, super excited about that. So make sure you, if you want to check that out, that you go to limitlessexpo.com and get a ticket. Also, hit that like button for us. We love it. It helps get the word out there. We're trying to spread a real estate message. So please hit the like button. So let's jump into today's topics. So today we're talking about falling home prices, but we can't do that without talking about inflation and rates as well. So it's really one big topic. Right now the economy, as much as we've been told it's so amazing, we're definitely on thin ice.
I would be as bold to say that the reason real estate prices are down are directly related to the price increase of interest rates. Period.
Right.
That's what created a bubble, low rates. So now, obviously, that's not a, revolutionary statement for anybody. But if you really take a look at commercial and single families lagging a bit, but commercial, it's immediate. So what I mean by that is if a seller's selling something and I'm basing it on cash flow, it immediately changes the price because my cash flow is going to be less because the cost of my mortgage is higher. So immediate. Whereas single family, I think there's a bit of a lag, and we're starting to see that now. It's funny though, because as you start to see these migration patterns of people moving around, there are markets that are still trending up, like some markets in Florida, North Carolina, and not every market. Some markets in Texas, but there are other markets that are really, 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 really going backwards. So you're starting to see some real focus on Portland, Seattle, which is where I'm from, those areas, San Francisco, LA. Prices are going down, and for all kinds of reasons. But I think that interest rates are the reason.
Well, and it's interesting, right? Because we just got a good jobs report, about a month ago, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago on our show, how it was very skewed, but it was skewed, because a lot of those jobs that were added were part-time jobs. People didn't include if they were somebody's second or third job because they're trying to keep up with inflation. And so
72,000 were government.
Yeah, 72,000 were government. So, and they corrected it so much for the seasonal workers more than they ever had. So even though it was skewed, though, it was still positive. So the Fed has to look at that as positive. And, if we haven't been crunched on the job side and we're only, inflation's only went down 2.5%. So it was almost 9%.
That's
and
what
now
I want
it's
everybody
at
to remember.
6.5%.
If you guys remember, we were at 9.1 and the Fed, we've had 8, I think at least 8. Is that right, Jerry? 8 increases. And we're still at 6.4.
Right.
So,
which is high.
Which is high, right? Right. So that means, and if you really dig into that CPI number, the Consumer Price Index, some areas are down, some areas are not. Some areas are really, like cost of autos are down, or used cars and new cars. Gas, fuel is down, which is good. But there's a lot of areas that are really up, like energy and certainly housing. Now, people would say housing's down, but as I did this video Friday, the point I was trying to make was if interest rates go up, then the mortgage payments go up, even if prices are trending down, because they haven't trended down that much.
Right.
So the people are looking at their payment, and the mortgage payments are up, and that's just forcing people into rentals, which is also inflationary. So if there's that many jobs that hit, that could potentially be inflationary. Wages are potentially inflationary if we're at over 50-year low on unemployment. Okay, so that's what the Fed is looking at. That if you're an employee, you're saying that's great. I'm going to have higher wages potentially. Well, the Fed sees it very differently, and they're looking at higher wages as a problem, as inflationary. So that's the
right, because
issue.
when you have higher wages, the price of goods is higher because you have to pay for those wages somehow, and that's kind of what we've seen over the past couple of years.
Well, you're seeing it in restaurants, you're seeing it in hotels, you're seeing it all over the place. Those wages do translate into higher prices.
Right, absolutely.
So, and then I think we're going to see it in shelter, which is the category. Shelter includes rentals, of course. 44% of that number is shelter, and and I think I just don't see there's not enough supply to offset raising rent growth.
Right, and so these homes are getting more and more unaffordable, which is obviously pushing people into rentals. And the Fed, people keep asking, when do we see rates going down? And the truth is we don't see rates going down anytime soon. And the only people I'm hearing saying rates are going to go down are people that are in the business. So they're either a mortgage broker or they're a real estate.
Right. If they're tied,
realtor.
You got to look at their intention. By the way, I'm not saying they're bad intentions. Maybe they were just hopeful, and we could be wrong.
Well, we could be wrong, but it's not that they have bad intentions, but like our friend Mo was telling us that the head of their department came in and said, he talked to so-and-so and said that. So it's almost like this chain of optimism.
Yes.
And we could be wrong, right?
A chain of optimism. That's perfect. And then
but we could be wrong, but we're not seeing why the Fed would bring rates down if there's more jobs being added. Home inventories, prices have not come down that much.
Energy's up, food's up.
Everything's up, and inflation is really hurting people. And, I just read an article yesterday from Yahoo. It's Yahoo, so who knows? But it was saying that people that were making decent wages that are younger are moving home because with their credit card debt and their student loan debt and everything else, they still can't afford to live on their own.
That's right.
Because of all the inflation. And I know we hear about it at the office, too, of how much stuff is costing people.
Right. So the Fed's target is 2%. Everybody needs to remember that. And we're still over 6. So we went from 6.5 in December to 6.4. That's nothing. right? And so we did have some immediate adjustments, but also let's don't forget about if you Google how long does it take an interest rate to actually ripple through the economy, just Google that. You'll see that it's anywhere from 9 to 12 months. So what does that mean? That means that as rates go up, let's say in the summer of last year, it can take 9 months to 12 months before it actually makes its way through the economy. There's a lag effect, as you would expect. If rates go up and the cost to buy a car, not the actual price of the car, but the actual financing cost to buy the car, goes up. Well, then there's going to be less cars sold, and that's gonna make its way through the economy the way it does, and that's what actually slowed down some of that used car inflation. Is the higher rates slowed that down, which is what one of the categories. So I think you have to look at the lag effect, and I don't think that we're, as I keep telling everybody, I think we had this conversation, I think we're in like the third inning here.
Right.
Second or third inning. And I think that we're just now starting to see that. And I think I even did a video that said, I don't think we're going to see inflation, much below somewhere between, it's going to be between 4 and 5% by the end of this year, which means that the Fed is going to continue to chip away at this economy. And I think shelter is going to be one of those things, because there's only one way to offset. We have a housing shortage, guys. As we all know, everybody that's in real estate here all knows we have a housing shortage, period. But we can't build it because land's so expensive. We can't build it because the cost to build it is so expensive. We can't buy it or build it because the cost to finance it is so high. Those are the facts.
Right. Like that's the thing. There's no inventory coming to the market because, one, builders are nervous, right now, because it was way more expensive to build. And now you have home prices going down, and it's so expensive to finance it. So there's just no incentive for them to build anything.
Yep. Well, and I think a lot of you guys are going to look at stats and say, well, there's a lot of new construction. Well, lag. So Ross, my partner, and I, we've had 6 sites that we own for a couple of years. When you buy a site, you get it ready to build, you finance it, you build it, it can take years. So there's lag with that again. So as the cost of, some of these projects are being mothballed for a while, like we're probably going to hold and see, and keep the land. So not everyone's building, even though the projected or planned. If you're under construction, you have to finish. That's a different issue.
Well, what was interesting is when we were in Florida, there was a couple big communities down there, and the building was frozen.
I know.
And that's what you're looking at too, because if people can't afford these rates, they've already broken ground, they don't have the money to, of the building cost that has went up, then they're forced to stop and have to figure something out.
I think people need to realize, so when you buy a piece of land, it does not cash flow. You spend a bunch of money to get it approved through the city or county or whatever. Then you go to the bank with those plans and you go get a loan. So if that property was, let's say in the first quarter of 2022, and you got the loan and you broke ground, you probably had a loan in the 4%, high 3 range, potentially, for construction loans. They're personal, so they're not non-recourse. What that means is they have personal guarantees to the people personally, the developers. Okay, now they start building, they start moving along, and we've had price increases on the interest rates. So now maybe they're in the 5-6 range. So can you imagine, whatever the project is, who's ever building it has been killed by increases in those mortgage payments, in addition to higher labor costs, higher supply costs, higher materials costs, all those kinds of things. So that's what's going on. So if you're a builder that has, that's your business, and you're seeing all this happen, you're slowing the car down. You're going, okay, wait a second. We're not going to be able to sell these for what we thought we were going to sell them for, because our margins are getting squeezed. So higher interest rate costs squeeze a developer's margin. Higher labor costs squeeze a developer's margin. Higher material costs squeeze a developer's margin. Now, a lot of you might not care about that, but if somebody says, if they're going to try to build a house for $400,000 and sell it for $500,000, and now you're sitting at close to $500,000 or high fours, you might question whether or not you're going to start that project. And so that's the issue on the new construction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like to look at what's going on the ground, right? So you can read all the articles you want. And as you know, a lot of them are skewed one way or the other, depending on what the people want you to do. But you can't really argue with what you see. And so, when we were in Florida, so I was with my family in Florida last week, and we were in a Airbnb community. So they have those down there where every house in the entire subdivision was an Airbnb. And the longest somebody could stay there was 1 month. That was the absolute longest you could stay. So anyways, a lot of them were empty.
Okay.
A lot of them were empty. And so you can't say, oh, this is somebody's second house or, they're not there. Like, no, these are strictly Airbnbs and they were sitting empty. And we weren't quite at peak season, but we were close to peak season because peak season's kind of like the beginning of middle of February. And
right. Well, we'll see. We're going to do a collective event down there this summer. It's going to be interesting. We're already starting to see that. By the way, the point there is somebody owns that house.
Right.
Somebody has a mortgage on that house. Somebody's furnished it. Somebody's, contracted Airbnb to, help lease it and rent it, maybe VRBO and all those others. There's somebody that's not cash flowing that owns that house. So that is the point.
Absolutely. And so, and the other point though, is there's tons of those around that area. So even though Florida is actually doing pretty well with real estate, if travel starts to slow down, that could really affect their housing community because there's probably more vacation rentals in Florida than probably any other state would be my guess.
Probably pretty close to one of the highest, I would guess.
Yeah.
Arizona's pretty high, but
Arizona's high too.
A lot bigger population-wise. So,
and they have so many cities for tourism.
Yeah. But you're right. It's interesting because last year, Texas, Florida, and North Carolina all had over 100,000 plus positive net migration. What does that mean? That means people moving in versus people moving out. So what that does is it puts stress on all the other things, on the school systems, on the restaurants, on the housing, rental housing, single for sale housing, all that. So all that stuff gets stressed. So it could be it's a very interesting time where you have some markets that are going negative, very much negative, like over 10% negative, and there are other markets that are still positive.
Well, and even with the Airbnb situation, 50% of all rentals in Phoenix did not get rented for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, by the way.
So we had the Super Bowl, the golf outing, Barrett, Jackson, and 50% of Airbnb sat empty.
Arguably the best time to be in Arizona, the Barrett Jackson, if you guys don't know what that is, it's a big car show. I went. That was awesome. The Super Bowl, of course, and then we were at the Waste Management Open, which I have a box at, and it's packed here, packed. And there was all kinds of articles about that.
Well, and realistically, people are getting squeezed. People are getting squeezed by inflation, and the easiest thing to cut when you're getting squeezed is traveling. So that's going to really affect the short-term market. And I personally think that a lot of these short-term rentals are going to be adding inventory, especially to these vacation markets.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. We were in Vegas this weekend. We got back last night. It did not look like there was any kind of recession going on there, man. I'll tell you what. But people are still spending like crazy.
They are. They're still spending, but we'll see. I'm interested. If any of you own Airbnbs, I would love it if you commented because I just think that Airbnb is starting to feel a crunch. And the people that bought the Airbnbs a while ago are fine because they don't need to make that much money to get into cash flow. The people that bought the Airbnbs in the last 2 years and were riding on that being booked most of the time, they're the ones that are going to have to sell, and they're the ones that are going to get squeezed.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think that same thing with commercial. Anything that you bought, most things that people bought in the last 2 years, I think we've seen a big at least 20% adjustment on the price. So you can't sell to get out of something.
Right. Paul said Barrett Jackson shows everyone how many rich people live out there. And well, a lot of people just go for the fun of it, right?
Well,
Not
I'll
to
tell
buy
you
a
this
car.
too. A lot of the locals don't go to that.
Yeah.
It's a lot of out of town people.
Plus, you said that the cars were selling for a lot cheaper
They
this year than
were,
last
yeah,
year.
we had some go through this year, friends of mine, and we were right there on. I can't remember what it was called. The where they get them ready and put them up on stage, and the cars were down. Barrett will tell you on their website that there were more sales, and that was true. In other words, there's a top line number, gross sales, but then there's the car prices. Like what does a 67 Chevelle go for, or 69 Corvette go for, or 69 Camaro go for? Those are generally down.
Yeah, absolutely. And so another thing that was interesting, and I encourage you all to do this. I've encouraged you to do it before, but last night, we were at Ken's son's house in Scottsdale, and there was a few houses that were listed for sale, 4 actually, which is way more than normal, because during 2020, 2020, 21, we would be lucky to find 1 in there because we're kind of looking in that area. So last night there was 4. So one of them, had just sold, and it sold for $400,000, but it had a price cut of $50,000. So it was listed for $450,000, sold for $4.
And by the way, this is a $3,000 a month plus market, right? For the home.
Yeah.
So the math works all day long. I mean, a long-term renter. A long-term renter is going to spend $3,000 to. We know the metrics in this.
Right.
We own a house in this block.
Right, absolutely. But there was another one that was priced at $615,000. It was a little bit bigger. And it had price cut $10,000. It had been on the market for over 30 days and still wasn't sold, still not getting a ton of interest because I talked to the realtor. So these are real price cuts. So then we went on Zillow, and this is what I encourage you to do in your area, is you can actually filter price cuts on Zillow and look at the price cuts that are happening in your area. Some of it is people just overpriced their house and now they're cutting it. But most of it at this point is people having to cut to try to sell their house. And there's a lot of them sitting on there. And this is kind of what happens is this inventory starts to kind of build up and people keep starting to slowly lower their prices, but they still, want to make as much money as they can, or some of them need to make a certain amount of money based on what they bought it for. So it's the inventory starting to trickle up. And when inventory trickles up, this is when you're going to see falling prices. And this is when you're going to get more inventory. And this is when a correction happens. So we were talking about that last night. And Ken was saying, this is when you wait 6 to 12 months.
Yes.
Like just because you're starting to see price cuts does not mean you buy right now. This is, like he said, the third inning, the beginning.
Time to build cash.
Time to build cash. However, there are markets, like my family's from Akron, Ohio, and in their town specifically, my brother's looking for a home, and I was looking at price cuts there, and there really aren't any because there's not hardly any inventory. So it does depend on your area, and that's why you need to be looking for price cuts on Zillow in your area.
I like, it's literally, it says price reductions only. So that's the beauty of that.
Yeah.
You click on that, and it only literally gives you any homes, and then of course you can take a look at the amount. And there were some that were $500,000. Some of the higher priced homes. There's also that piece of land near. We were going to build a house, as you guys know. The costs came in so high. We put that on hold for now. And there was the 2 acres of land that the guy was going to build 3 houses on. Mm-hmm. And he listed it. It was listed for $5 million. It's been on Zillow for 10 days. And so what that tells me is, again, he has the land. He's not going to build on it, and he's going to pass. Why would somebody pass when they have a piece of land in that location? Because it doesn't pencil. That's why.
Yeah, he knows that he's gonna have to sell those houses for less than it is that he's building.
Build them for more than he wants, and he's gonna have to find that right buyer that can afford that 7 or 8% interest rate, perhaps if they're not high by the time they're done, because they're 2-year builds.
Yeah, and even us, we were going to build a house, and we were penciling it out ourselves once we got the price to build back, and it's about double of what it would be right now to buy the same house.
Yeah, so that's the thing. It's like we were like, ooh, okay. So again, I guess as you know, I'm in the business, so we wanted to build a new home, but we ended up putting it on hold for now. I still own the land, we're kind of figuring out what we want to do next.
Right. But if it's half to buy, most people aren't going to want to build, and most builders aren't going to want to build because they can sell it for about, half or 3/4 of what it's going to cost for them to build.
Yeah. And by the way, guys, like my house was approved by the city and bid out. So these are real numbers, like within the last 6 months. So, these are the general contractor had the whole thing bid out. So we do know, what was supposed to be 2 years ago and what it is now it's not quite double, but it's pretty darn close.
So Mohammed wants us to talk about the Midwest, and I actually, we're not experts in the Midwest because we don't invest in the Midwest, but we know an okay amount about the market, put it that way, because we have friends that invest there. So the thing with the Midwest is that you're not seeing as big of price cuts generally in most of these smaller towns but you also didn't see as many of the gains as like Phoenix saw or, places in Florida and Texas saw either. But they did see an increase in real estate prices for sure. Midwest can be a safer spot in the way that there's not a lot of vacation rentals. The home prices, they're not as expensive and they don't fluctuate as much. And this was always the case. Even in 2008, even with the housing correction, the Midwest, because I lived there in Ohio, we didn't feel it to the same extent as like Phoenix and some of these boom and bust towns saw it, right? I guess my issue with the Midwest is that they're not necessarily gaining a lot of population. And I think that's why you don't invest there. Is that correct?
Yeah, I like slow and steady wins the race, though. So it's a great question, I think. But what you do want is you want to be where people are going. So why are they going there? And there's a number of reasons, from safety to weather to cost to jobs, to a location. Obviously, it's no secret why people want to live in Florida. It's beautiful there. There's a lot of sunshine. You can go to the beach. Those kinds of things. And Texas, is you got generally low tax. If a lot of the companies are relocating there from California. I think probably everything's lower than California from a corporation standpoint. But so you have to look at that, and then you have to. I think the best example is what happened when you actually saw this yourself in the Midwest when the auto industry kind of hit the skids, right? That's what killed Detroit, and that's what killed a lot of the Midwest.
Yeah, the Midwest relies on certain markets, right? And like you said, the car market was a big one. But when I was living in Cleveland, so Cleveland Clinic hires like 70% of Cleveland's workforce because they have on-campus like living for everyone that comes there. They have hotels for people to stay. They have their own like transportation systems. So Cleveland Clinic actually thought about moving out of Cleveland about 4 years ago, probably.
Ooh,
and they were going to move south. I forget which state it was, but they were going to move south. And then I think with the pandemic is what made, they decided to stay, put it that way. They decided to stay in Cleveland. But the problem with these markets is, say you invested in Cleveland and Cleveland Clinic moves out of Cleveland. That's going to be a huge hole, just like the car market was.
Yep.
To the to that.
And I think that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
You got to look at military bases as people get deployed or close with the new administrations. They decide they want to fund something. I've seen that happen. I've also seen the other side of it, where I grew up in Seattle, where Boeing moved their corporate headquarters to Chicago. And I was like, wow, that's a big deal. Now, they still make some of the planes in the area I grew up in, the 747 specifically in Everett, Washington. I think they stopped doing that one. But so, you start to look at what's going on for manufacturing and corporate headquarters as they move around, and you can reasonably make a good decision around what's going to happen with that housing market, I think.
Absolutely. And but they are bringing things to the Midwest, like all those battery plants.
Correct.
So as long it can be good and it can be bad. It's just going to be heavily reliant on one industry. Where like if you're in Phoenix or you're in Florida, you have a lot going on with a whole bunch of different industries. Tourism, businesses opening, population migrating. But because of it, it can be more of a boom and bust. You can have a little bit of a roller coaster in those markets. So it just depends.
The economic development departments in those markets that's the best place to go look. Those are governmental, but their point and their purpose is to attract new business. So, that's a great place to take a look at. Like when we're looking at an area like in around Corpus Christi, we were looking down there. There's a big port being built in Texas on the Gulf. You start to take a look at what's really happening and the economic development. They're kind of handling a lot of that stuff, and that's a really, really good barometer. It's not always foolproof because they are trying to get people to move there too. But it is a good place to start.
It is. And I will say with the Midwest, it's much more affordable. I mean, you can get a single family home for under $200,000 in a safe area. And it rents, for, $1,500 a month.
If there's
or
a
something.
renter.
So if there's a renter.
Yeah.
So correct. So it can be a good market. Kathy Fettke loves the Midwest.
She does.
I mean, there's certain people that love the Midwest, and we don't know enough about it to say where to invest or how to invest. It's better to follow her for that. But I will say that, it's definitely of a less rocky market, but it's not as easy to find renters. And we deal with this. I know someone that is invested heavily in Tacoma, Washington, and there's not a lot of like tourism and travel and things that come there. So when you're looking to do like a short-term rental there, you need to focus more on corporate. We're in Phoenix, you have corporate and you have travel and you have, hospitals and you have all these things that people come into town for in events and, that you don't have in some of these smaller towns.
I lived in Tacoma, so I have an experience there. And the reason Tacoma's booming is because Seattle's so expensive. Mm-hmm. That's why, Tacoma is, they say, 30, 40 minutes away. It's a little bit more south. And so people, as these big cities start to become unaffordable, just like New York, just like LA, you start to see these other cities boom because people are looking for houses that are half price. It's going to be interesting to see has the Seattle prices are now imploding, whether or not Tacoma and some of these other markets are going to be fine. The one thing I would just caution people that, if you really want to make a good decision, and you want to buy in some of those Midwest markets, focus on employment and focus on school districts. So, people make choices where they move for the public school system. And, that's a big deal, believe it or not. Like if you're a parent with kids and you have, and you have a family and you're moving somewhere, that is definitely high on your radar. Like, what's the best public school system?
Oh yeah, we've had people live in our rentals just because of the school
Correct.
system. They want to know what school system, and they're limited.
Yeah.
Also, they don't want their kids to change schools, but
Correct.
a lot of it is how good it is.
Right. So those are a couple pro tips for you.
And a lot of people are asking too on YouTube, because interest rates are going up, savings rates are also going up, right?
Yeah.
So we had a good question on here from Robert, but other people are asking similar things. Is if I'm borrowing at 6.5%, but my money market's paying 3.5%, aren't I really just borrowing at 3%? And isn't that still good?
Well, that's one way to say it. I think if we're focusing on which is better, of course, if you have savings and you're really making 3%, I don't know, maybe is that high now? Perhaps 3% savings.
Yeah, I think that's about where it is on some of the money markets.
They're imagine the difference. If inflation rates at over 6, you're right. You're negative. You're going backwards 3, but that the point is that that's for sure happening with your savings. But if you're borrowing at 6.5 and you're making 7 or 8, then that actually starts. Then now you start to cover your savings, if that makes sense. So there's nothing wrong with borrowing at 6, let's say. Nothing, as long as it cash flows, and you look at, what's your cash on cash return. So for me, there's a balance between how much you hold in cash versus how much you're actually in debt. And of course, is that debt covered? If you've got something that you're under construction today and you're paying 6% and there's no income coming in, that's not good. You might be better off in cash, and as an example. So you have to look at the whole picture. Is a very, very good question.
Absolutely. So let's get to some of our Inner Circle questions. So if you'd like to register for the Inner Circle, go to kensinnercircle.com, and it's $30 a month, and Ken answers your questions, sometimes on the show, sometimes by email, just depending on the question. So we're going to start with Kunli. He or she says, as a beginner with little to show for assets, how can I start buying apartments?
You can't.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. You actually can, but you gotta. Who's gonna invest in you, right? With no experience. So that's the biggest issue. You might find somebody, but then, would you do it with somebody else without experience? So you can go out and raise money and you can buy stuff. Period. It doesn't have to be apartments. It could be start a business. You can do whatever you want. The question is, you got to build a team. If you build a team of people, you don't actually have to know much. And then they invest in the team and the idea, and people take money out of something, invest in something else, based on the business plan that you have put together. So raising money is not very hard if you have something that people can invest in that makes sense financially. So focus on that. Focus on the deal.
Yeah, and you can also focus on starting really small too. Like, sometimes when I hear people want to start with an apartment, like I've been doing this for, 7 or 8 years, and I feel like at this point I could do a small apartment. But if I would have just waltzed into a small apartment, I would have been in trouble, because there's a lot I've learned in the past 7 years. A couple ways you can start is you can start by buying your own place and renting it out. I mean, that's a good way to start. Or if you literally don't really have any money, I know people that have started doing Airbnb rentals. So they've literally just found an apartment complex or found a small house and done a deal with the owner of a monthly rent amount and started running it on Airbnb. And the beauty of that is you learn how to be a landlord, and you also don't need any money to get started. You just need to be able to cover that base amount if you can't rent it. And, you can learn how to turn a profit, what the margins are, and you can get a little experience, because to Ken's point, why would someone invest in you? Like, even if somebody had an amazing deal and they just were new and had no idea what they were doing, I wouldn't invest in it, unless I could physically have ownership to manage it, because they don't know what they're doing, and there's so many things.
Here's the thing. When I started and I had no experience, I had a deal that made sense, and that's what the people invested in. And then they said, can you pull it off? And obviously I did, but that's the point. They're not investing in you at that point. At some point that can shift based on your experience, but think about it. Flip the tables. Would you invest in somebody that just had an idea and never done it before? So, there's nothing wrong with the question, by the way. It's a great question. But you can put your team together and you can do this. But the deal funds everything. Let's don't forget. At the end of the day, it's not about an individual. It's not about a team. The actual thing that actually pays everybody back is the real estate and the plan that you have to do with it.
And Eli said, find a way to house hack. And I agree with that too. Whether you buy a house or you rent a house from somebody and you rent the rooms to other people, that's a great way to learn to be a landlord, learn to deal with tenants. And I actually had a girl do that. We used to rent a house. We were probably 24. And the girl rented it from the guy, and then we all paid her, and she charged us more than her rent was. And she individually found all three of us. And so you can do that too if you don't have any money and you're looking to get started. It's really just starting to understand cash flow, understand how to find tenants, understand how to manage tenants, and understand what can go wrong.
Which is a lot of things, yeah. And then also be realistic about what's going to go on in the market. We talked about Airbnb right now. So as much as the hacking the Airbnb can work, it has to be covered with occupancy. Again,
Mm-hmm.
there has to be an income source to pay everybody.
Right.
Period.
Absolutely. So Skylar asked, how do I get, so this is kind of related, right? How do I get investors to invest in me and not in my deals? I feel when I approach a potential investor, I'm not getting their attention because I'm trying to pitch a deal. How do I convince them that I'm in this game for the long run and I'm not trying to run with their money?
So I'll give you an example. I got an email last week from somebody I've never spoken with that said, I'm putting together a group of people to go out and buy some medical office buildings. I've never done them before, but I'm trying to put together a group of people to go out and do this. Well, I love the email. Why would I do that? Why would I, go and spend my time educating somebody and helping them go out and, put together a whole business, bring my knowledge base, bring my equity base, and all that kind of stuff. So what happens is, you have to be realistic. You don't really bring much to the table. That's the cold hard facts, and unless you have a lot of experience. So at some point, even then, you got to be careful. Your ego can get away from you. If you have a couple good deals and they've done really well for you, doesn't mean the next one's going to do well. So we've had a history of a lot of success, but also we've had some that haven't been, and that's what an investor looks for. I will tell you, when I first met Kiyosaki that's 20 plus years ago, one of the first questions he asked was, have you ever lost money? It's a great question. And the answer was yes. And then we talked about it. And I asked him the same question. And he said yes. And we talked about it. So, that's what real, I'm not saying, but the other thing to keep in mind is, if you don't have a deal, then what does it matter? What do you want to just put a bunch of money in your bank account and then wait for something? So, you know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. It's just handing you cash until you're ready. So again, the deal, everything revolves around the deal. So if the deal makes sense, and there's a lot of ways to make sense in deals, then use that as your platform, not you. And then you become the expert to make money for the people. Not, why am I not attracting money? It's because of the deal. I'm sure you're well-intended, but the truth is the deal attracts the cash, and then you actually are just, the conductor. That's all.
Yeah, you have to be educated on what you're talking about, right? And you have to be able to answer tough questions. Now, maybe the people that you're asking, they don't want to invest with you,
or they don't have it,
and so that is a possibility too. But I went through this because with Ken, I thought about syndicating a couple of things, and I said, well, maybe we talk about doing this once the market corrects a little bit, and I said, well, maybe I can talk to some people now and kind of get their buy-in that they'll syndicate with me if I find something. And he goes, that's such a waste of your time, because nobody's going to actually do that until they see the deal.
Well, they'll say yes.
They'll say yes, sure, that sounds great.
Bring me whatever.
But you don't know. I mean, it'd be like if somebody came to you like, hey, will you invest with me if I find a good deal? It's like, sure. But like, what's a good deal and when? And so it makes no sense to do that until you have a deal.
Right. I do understand the anxiety, though. Trust me, I was there. Danille was there. Mm-hmm. I get it. You want to have committed money before you put your butt on the line. But the truth is, people invest in projects. So at this point, we've done somewhere between $2 and $3 billion in acquisitions and development. And I can assure you that some people are liquid from month to month. Some people are not liquid from month to month. Some people don't like Texas. Some people don't like Arizona. Some people don't like development. Some people don't like ground up construction. Some people don't like, there's so many different things and variables that people like or don't like. But at the end of the day, they're investing in the project. So we have many projects, and some investors invest in all of them, and some investors invest in very select ones based on their own individual wants, which is the way it should be. So that's the thing. It's not, you can't take it personally. This is, but I do like the question, because I think I also believed that I needed the money before I went out and asked for it. But all that does is create meetings, and then there's nothing to show them.
Right.
Like, bring me something. Bring me actually a deal that I can actually review together. And then that is actually where you need to shine. This is the plan. I'm going to buy it for X. I'm going to buy a vacant industrial building. I already have the tenant, and it's going to be worth more. That's a plan. That's how you raise money. And then you do that, and then the investors are like, they did exactly what they said they were going to do. I'm going to invest in the next one. That's how it works. It's not I'm thinking about, I've done a lot of work on real estate, on the internet, and I went to a couple seminars. Those are all good things, but it's not going to raise capital for you.
Absolutely. So make sure if you're listening, you hit the like button, trying to get over 100 here. The next question comes from Caleb, and this is actually a very good question. My fiance and I are wanting to buy a triplex or fourplex for our first real estate investment and live in one of the units. This will be our very first property purchase. How would you recommend going about this? And is this the right time?
Nice job.
We are wanting to buy this before we get married in November 2023, so we're able to combine our first-time homebuyer fee.
Ooh, lots of big meaty issues here.
Yep.
First of all, if you can make it cash flow, then by all means do it. The other thing that I would recommend, and Danille and I do this, is we both have our own LLC. Mm-hmm. So we both come into a deal together, but not as a partnership. Oh, there's a partnership technically, but we both have our own individual. She has hers, I have mine. We bring them together. That avoids any potential issues down the road, right? And then the operating agreement needs to be super clear. Like if I can't sell something if she doesn't want to sell it, or I can't put debt on it if she doesn't want to put debt on it, those kinds of things. There's some joint decisions that have to be made. And then, of course, who manages it, how all that works. So in this particular case, Danille manages the assets, manages the people, and so we have an agreement. But even though we're married, you have to have it that clear. So, but I love the idea. It's as simple as contacting every single realtor, broker that you can in the market that you want, and saying, I want to see everything that's a duplex, triplex, quad, and then just getting as much deal flow as you can, and then just looking at the best ones, and then it's just math.
Yeah, and don't be so stuck up on the first-time home buyer credit that you're in a hurry, because, it's all about cash flow, right? And it's also about the market. It's about cash flow, but it's also about the market. So if you're in a market that's trending downwards, then you need to be cognizant of that. And so
I looked at, we literally made offers on 50 deals last year in 2022, and we bought 2.
Right. And the one that we bought, it took us a long time to find. So I just caution you to get hung up on that credit, because it's probably like $7,000 or something for each of you to use it. And if you buy something that doesn't cash flow, or you buy something that's trending downwards, that $7,000 is going to be eaten up pretty quickly. So I just, if you find something, awesome. If you don't find something, it's totally cool. You're on the right path. Whether or not you get that additional home buyer credit or not, when you have this cash flowing piece of real estate and you're house hacking, I love the idea. I just don't want you to be in such a hurry that you're like, well, because of the $7,000 credit, we need to do it in October.
That's not the reason.
And even though this deal's not that great, I still we need this credit, so we're just do it.
I see this all the time, by the way, especially on the 1031s. So 1031 tax deferred exchange the 1031 is the tax code. It basically means you can sell something, put it in with an intermediary, and then use that money to buy something else. And what happens a lot of times is people fall into this trap, is that they sell something, and to avoid the tax from that sale, they force into something else, and so they're letting tax guide that transaction. So just be careful on that credit, or the tax break, or whatever it is that you're trying to save, that doesn't drive the decision. And it can happen. I've seen it happen a lot.
Absolutely. So our next question comes from Chad, and he said, when analyzing a deal, what is your cash on cash required and cash flow per door to move forward?
So we don't look at a per door. We look at the deal, the partnership. So typically we like to hit 5, 6, 7, 8% cash on cash. So what does that mean? That means that if we put $100,000 in, we get $7,000 cash out. That's 7%. So that's basically how we see it, right? So now I think that every deal is going to be a little bit different, obviously, but essentially, if you're going to raise money, like we've been talking about a lot during this call or this live, that somebody's going to be taking money now from, let's say, a 3% savings account. If savings is really 3%, they're going to be saying, "Oh, am I going to take 3% out of my savings account and put it into another deal at 3%? Probably not." So the cash on cash has to be meaningful to the investor or even you, because if you're going to move it, if you're going to make 3.5%, let's say, I don't know if that's where the savings rates are today, then why would you move it to 3% cash on on a real estate deal? You're going to keep it in cash. You're better off there. So so it has to be quite a bit north of what somebody's making somewhere else, and I guess that's the lesson.
Absolutely. So David from the Inner Circle wants to know, do you think it's worth investing for cash flow in Australian real estate? I'm coming as a beginner.
Oh, I don't know enough about, the tax laws are a little bit different there. I know that they have this thing called negative gearing, Gearing. It's a bizarre thing. Because when I was there, I was talking to this guy that was doing it. And negative gearing basically means negative cash flow. And so they're basically buying things for tax and not for cash flow. So, but again, I don't know enough. I do know that you have to look at the laws and make sure that also there's if you're a U.S. citizen, you're going to be taxed as a worldwide. I do know that. So if you make money in Australia, you're going to be taxed on it for sure in the U.S. So there's some complications there, and then you also have currency issues with you're going to obviously have to buy it in Aussie dollars. I can't remember the name of them anymore, but I've been there a number of times, but I just can't recall. And when you bring it back, you're going to have to convert it back to U.S. dollars, and so you've got currency rates as well. So there's a lot to consider there, other than just buying.
Investing out of the country is more complicated than people kind of think that it is a lot of the time.
Can be. It's nothing wrong with it, by the way. It's if you take a look at over the years, like before Russia invaded the Ukraine, there was a lot of money that came from Russia into the U.S. to buy U.S. real estate. The same thing happened with Japan. Same thing happened with China. So a lot of the big money does look for safer areas to move their money. So it's interesting. We don't talk about it much here, but it's fun to watch the money flow from country to country based on what's going on in that country. So as you would imagine. So right now, believe it or not, as they call the U.S. the cleanest dirty shirt, which means that it's the least corrupt of most of the countries, which is hard to believe actually, but that's what they say.
I also like Eli for Caleb said, find single family homes that you can make into duplexes. Husband buys one, wife buys one. If you can't find a tri or four.
That's a great idea.
Yep. And ADUs, additional dwelling units, are big right now in a lot of different states. So make sure you guys check out on Wednesday. Ken's going to be with the advisors on, is this for our Inner Circle members?
Yeah.
Oh, it's on YouTube. Okay, so it's going to be with Mauricio and Ken here on YouTube. So make sure to check that out.
Before we jump off of there, you guys, I don't know if you see, Mauricio is an attorney, and Eric's a CPA. So you guys have questions, you're going to want to bring those. Obviously, I could talk real estate all day long, but those are really, really, really good guys that can be able to answer those kinds of questions for you specifically about entities and syndications and how to raise money and of course tax law stuff. So that's going to be fun.
Awesome. And then also make sure you get your Limitless tickets before they go up in price on Friday. So right now they're discounted. Now's the time to get them. We're going to have a blast. You'll be able to meet Ken, chat with him, and we got a bunch of speakers.
That's going to be fun this year. We have some, I'm not going to announce who we have, but I'm very excited. We're putting our list together.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you guys next Monday.
Okay. See you guys. Bye.